Hey chess fans, in today's video I'm gonna teach you about a very important tool, very nice weapon to win games at chess. And we are going to talk about passed pawns. Passed pawns, what is it? What can it do? How dangerous can it become? And how can you crush your opponent? Well, there is no better way to illustrate that by showing you a game of the one and only Hans Niemann. Past week Hans had been playing in the Turkish League, and it's still going on in fact. And Hans had a very interesting game playing with the white pieces against an international master from Iran with the name Mahdi Gholami Orimi. And it's a very cool game. A lot of interesting things to learn from it. That's why I want to show it to you. And before we are going to do that, just one little favor. You know what I'm gonna ask, but I really need your support to help the channel to grow. There are various ways to do that. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, like this video of course, share it among your friends, and last but not least, it is possible to make a donation via PayPal to help the channel to grow and see more videos like this one. So here we go. Very interesting game, as I said. Hans is playing with the white pieces against Gholami, and Hans starts the game with the move 1c4. Knight f6, knight f3, e6. Of course, we are going to check out the entire game, but it's mainly about the middle game part. After the move g3, we have a Catalan, d5, d4, pawn takes c4. This is all very well-known stuff. Bishop g2, c5, castling kingside, knight c6, and now finally white is trying to regain the pawn by bringing out the queen, ready to take on c4. Bishop d7, queen takes c4, and now very interesting move b5. Still very well-known theory. Black is attacking the queen on c4. Now if you do take with the queen on b5, then you place your queen in the line of the bishop on d7. Black can just take with the knight on d4, for instance, attacking that queen. So instead, queen d3 is played. Now the move c4, attacking the queen one more time, but white is okay with that. White doesn't care that he's spending another move going around with the queen. Queen goes back to c2 and black played rook c8. So you can see that black is having a majority on the queen side. And it's a 3 versus 2, but what has white in return? Well, that is a majority in the center. So if you look at the pawn structure, you see that white has 2 pawns on d4 and e2 against the pawn on e6. And that is actually going to play a very important role in this game. At this point, Hans played the move knight to c3, attacking the pawn on b5, but he's maybe not even really intending to take it. Black defended with the move a6, but I can tell you that there's even a better way for black to play, because you can just continue developing instead. With bishop e7, it's a much more useful move. If you take that pawn on b5, there is knight b4 with an attack on the queen and a discovered attack on the knight as well. If you play queen a4 to defend the knight, well, black can just go for the move a6, and here you see that the knight cannot move away as it will hang the queen on a4. So I think if black would have played more precisely with the move bishop e7, everything would still have been okay. Another possibility is just to push with your own b pawn so that you try to get some space over there. Has been seen in other games as well. But you want to see what happened in this game. Black played the move a6. White now mobilizes his pawn formation in the center. 2 beautiful pawns. Bishop e7 played. And now white played the move a3. Why is this move played? I think 2 reasons, but they're about just to cover the b4 square. First of all, you prevent black from playing the move b4 anytime soon, and also the knight cannot jump to that square. Now black comes up with a different plan, played here the move knight a5, so you see that Gholami is intending to jump with the knight to b3 to hit the rook. But look at this, bishop f4, active development. Why the bishop goes to this square, you will find out very, very soon. As after castling kingside, white puts the rook on d1. Why is the rook on d1? Well, it's all about this pawn break, d4, d5. And with the rook behind this pawn, you're fantastically supporting the opening of the center. And also the bishop on f4 will support this pawn march. Well, knight b3 played. And here Hans played the move knight to e5, jumping in with the knight to the center. What's the idea of this move? Well, it's to open up the path for the bishop. The bishop is still being blocked by the pawn on e4, but after the move bishop e8, black is trying to make space for the queen to cover the actions in the center. Now, finally, this move, d5. All white's pieces, the knight, rook, bishop and pawn, are supporting the advance of this pawn. And that's why the knight is so fantastically placed on e5, as the bishop is now actively participating. Pawn takes d5 was played. How is white going to recapture? You may consider taking back with a pawn. You have a nice passed pawn already. However, Hans decided here to take with the knight. That's also a very good move, because you're setting up a threat against the queen. White to move here would definitely capture the knight on f6 with a discovered attack, discovered check, winning the queen on d8. So black is kind of forced here to take on d5, and now Hans Niemann recaptures with the pawn. Here you see that white has succeeded in creating a passed pawn on the d file, which is very nicely supported by the rook and the bishop. But what can you do with a passed pawn? Well, a passed pawn, the more it moves up the board, the more dangerous it becomes, and it will eventually be able to paralyze the black position. For instance, if the pawn would be on d6 or d7, it will be very difficult to move the pieces from the back rank, because then, okay, white is just going to push the pawn even further and eventually promote it. So it will become a new queen, and then white will be white will be up a lot of material. So that is the main plan. What should a defender try to do? Try to stop the pawn. Bishop d6 was played. So this is what we call a blockade. The bishop is in general quite an okay blockading piece. Knight is usually considered to be a better blockading piece, as the knight is the only piece which can jump over other pieces. But okay, a bishop is looking quite okay. And for now, it does stop the pawn on d5. But look at this. Hans played here the move knight c6. Attacking the queen. And here you see that if you, for instance, eliminate that knight, there is d takes c6 with an attack on the bishop. The bishop is pinned. If it moves away, then the queen on d8 will be taken. So white is going to win a lot of material here. Therefore, after knight c6, black should move the queen away and keep the bishop defended. So the queen goes to f6. You may think, okay, this bishop is under threat. Maybe black has ideas to take twice, for instance. But look at the next move. Very, very nice, classy move. Rook fe1. And this is important, guys, because we have the passed pawn, but next to it is the open file, and white is trying to make use of it. And the main point here is that if you do take the bishop is no longer there guarding the e7 square. It does allow knight e7 check, forking the king and rook. If king goes away, you take on c8, and white is up in exchange and will very soon probably win more material or try to push the d-pawn very soon. So very nice technique. What else can black do apart from taking the bishop on f4? Well, if you, for instance, take first on c6, then a clever idea here is to take with the bishop on d6 first, so that you hit the rook. If you do recapture on d6, now white is capturing the other piece, you can see that this pawn is still fantastically supported by the bishop. The knight on b3, it's standing there, but absolutely out of play. And thanks to the two rooks on the open files, white is dominating the center, having ideas to infiltrate, maybe with both rooks. Maybe the bishop can even come to d5, and together with the other pieces, you're able to create threats against the king or try to bring the pawn even more forward. So white is technically winning in this position. Well, in the game, rather than capturing any of these pieces, black played here the move rook c7 to cover the e7 square so that the white knight cannot go there. But look at this. Bishop takes d6 was played, queen takes d6, and now queen e2. Once again, it's the file next to the passed pawn which is so important. Now the queen is a defender, it's a blockading piece, but white is actually threatening now, for instance, to take twice on e8, and then you're gonna win material thanks to back rank issues with the king. How should black defend? Well, for instance, this was not played in the game, But if you play f6, then a key idea to make progress is to deflect the blockading piece. How to do that here? With a check. Knight e7, king h8, then you put a knight on f5 to tickle the queen. And if the queen goes away, then you push your d-pawn one more square, hitting the rook, and look at all white's pieces. They are standing there with one aim, and that is to support the march of the passed pawn. White has an overwhelming, decisive advantage. Well, instead of f6, they follow the move g6. So the idea is that the pawn is actually covering the f5 square. Now this maneuver with knight e7, knight f5 is no longer working. But white has an alternative plan. It's also super instructive. White is this time not going to play for an attack, but to offer the exchange of queens. This may come as a surprise, but this is what we call transformation of advantages. The main point is to deflect the blockading piece. Queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and whatever black is going to do, there's nothing to do against the move d6. Knight c5 played and d6. Here you see the knight is also controlling the next square. So the rook cannot block there. And for instance, if the rook goes back, you can just play d7 with a double attack, as the knight and rook are controlling that square. If you take everything, white will emerge with an extra piece. So the black rook has to move. It has to stay on the 7th rank. It goes to a7, only square available, covering the d7 square. But now it is bishop c6, renewing the threat of playing the move d7. So the bishop, knight and rook 3 times that square on d7 is covered. Black has no choice but to take on c6. Here the pieces are coming off the board, attacking the rook. Everything comes with tempo. That's why it is so important to, before pushing your pawn, to make sure that the other pieces are well placed as well. Now, in the game there followed rook a8. But if you, for instance, play rook d7, there is rook e7. This is again a very nice idea, because if you take on e7, there's pawn takes e7, you're hitting the rook. If the rook goes away, then boom, rook d8, and there's no way to keep the rook supported, as the e-pawn, now it's no longer d-pawn, but the e-pawn will be promoted. And now you may think, okay, black doesn't have to take. The knight on c5 is still protecting the rook on d7. But for instance, if you go king g7, then you are challenging the support of the blockading piece. So the knight on c5 is in trouble. White is putting too much pressure, and eventually black will collapse. So that is a typical strategy when trying to destroy the blockade. Well, let's get back. Rook a8 was played. So the rooks are covering the back rank. Now if you do play d7, probably black's idea would still have been to go knight b7 and control d8 square with the knight and 2 rooks. White is still in very good shape, but even stronger is rook e7, so that the knight on c5 is not able to do anything. Now, for instance, if you go rook ac8, was not played, White's plan here once again is to go rook c7 with the threat of knight e7 with a knight fork. You're about to win material, and if you, well, do something else, let's say king g7, anyway, knight e7 can be played. If the rook goes away, then you can take the knight on c5. If you take on c7, it's pawn takes c7, and the knight supports the next square for the pawn. So that will win a lot of material once again. Instead of rook ac8, rook fc8 was played. And I guess the point is that if you now, for instance, play something like rook c7, maybe king f8 can still be played. Well, not really sure how good that is. In any case, one of the main drawbacks of having the rook on c8 and not on f8 any longer is there is knight e5. So here we see another weakness, so typical for situations when you have a passed pawn. The defender needs to focus, needs to concentrate dealing with the march of that pawn, but has to make concessions elsewhere on the board. That's what you see here. Now you're threatening to take that pawn, and well, d7 is going to be played. Maybe rook d5 is going to be played. It's a really bad position for black here already. They follow the move knight d3, hoping probably to get some sort of rook endgame. If you do take on d3. I mean, this endgame is also pretty bad, but white should actually keep knights on the board. Knight takes f7 was played, and it's game over. Black even resigned already. This may look premature to you guys, but let me show you the following lines. For instance, if you do take the pawn on b2, hitting the rook, and hoping to create a passed pawn yourself, then we will see that white is much more advanced already. White can, for instance, go knight h6 check. And where is the king going? If you go king f8, it's rook f7, king e8, rook e1, king d8. And now you come in with the second rook, pawn on d6, the passed pawn. Also supports the rook to come in with the main threat of rook f8. And mate cannot be avoided. So the king cannot go to the center. But if you go to h8 instead, well, there is, for instance, knight g4 with the idea to go knight f6. And the position is just really, really bad. I mean, you can do various things, but it's just a game over. With a knight on f6, it will be checkmate, for instance. Now, one other variation which is very nice and typical for these type of positions with a passed pawn is after knight takes pawn on f7. Let's say if you go rook e8, trying to reduce the pressure by trading off pieces, the most clean way to convert is knight h6. And if you go king h8, there is rook takes, rook takes, and then d7 attacking the rook. And wherever the rook goes, there is knight f7 with a knight fork. And king g7, knight takes d8, it's game over as well. So, well, the alternative is king f8, but then it's rook f7 with checkmate. So, only 31 moves. Very impressive victory of Hans Niemann. Let me know, guys, please, in the comments. What do you think of this game? Hopefully it's very instructive and it will help you to win millions of games yourself with the use of a passed pawn. It's not only that the pawn is able to come forward and to become a queen, but it deflects the enemy's pieces from defensive duty. So it will also create concessions and will help you to exploit weaknesses elsewhere on the board. So I thought this was a very impressive game by Hans. Let me know your thoughts and we will see each other very soon again on the channel. Thanks for everything. Bye bye.